Hey folks, so if everything's gone correctly, I should be live now. So if you can hear me, say aloha. I don't know how that became the tradition, but it just did. And I'm here. I'm waiting for you with bated breath. Um, we got someone saying yo. So how you all doing? How's it going? Are you still in lockdown? Are you in some form of lockdown? How's everyone coping? Hopefully okay. Um, so yes, I've got yet another request from Josiah in this case for Sword and Shield versus Spear and Shield. Do you know what that topic I'm going to deal with when we get back to training, which hopefully won't be long now. We're expecting to reopen class in August, hopefully. So absolutely, we want to do that kind of sword and shield versus spear and shield. I want to be able to do it with various people actually physically doing it. So it's not something I've been able to do for the last 4 months, I'm afraid. Um, Mountain Blade Warband Napoleonic Wars live streaming when? Do you know what? That's actually not a bad idea. I've been playing Bannerlord, as you guys probably know from my ranting videos recently. I've been playing Bannerlord quite a bit, so that's distracted me from Napoleonic Wars. But I'm sure when I eventually rage quit Bannerlord for good, I'll go back to Napoleonic Wars because I do love it. So we've got, where are you all? Say where you're watching from. So we've got at least 100 people, 108 people are currently watching right now. So thank you very much for joining. As always, really appreciated. I always worry whenever I'm going to do these live streams whether anyone will actually turn up. And I'm sure one day when I do one, it'll just be like me and 3 people. So, oh, it's gone up to 115 now. Awesome. The numbers are going up. And yeah, so say where you are. I'm always curious to know where people are. We've got North Carolina. I think Have I been to North Carolina? I'm not actually sure. But Richard Delotto in North Carolina. Please don't do it with Pedro. It will skew the results. Oh, I see. The sparring. Sorry. I was wondering if you were suggesting something completely inappropriate there. So yeah, I think that's a fair point about Pedro. I always like whenever I do those videos where I use people as guinea pigs in the class to do sort of let's see what happens when we do this weapon and that weapon and this scenario and whatever. I try to just have a cross section of the people who are available. So admittedly, there are some people who just do well with everything. Thank you for all saying aloha when you could hear me. It's always good to know that people out there can actually hear what that I'm actually streaming and online. So where else have we got people? Czech Republic, nice. Metalhead in Czech Republic. Toronto, Canada, awesome. So we've got loads of different time zones here. Captain Context, I love that name. Utwas petat dokiel dienve. Yeah, an Excalibur reference. I love it. Man, I watched Excalibur basically on permanent loop for about 2 years of my teenage life, I think. And I haven't watched it for a few years now. I should go back and watch that. Wiltshire, awesome, cool. I like Wiltshire. I'll be driving past Wiltshire quite soon. Stuck in the barracks. Which barracks are those, RD? Are they real barracks, or is that a gaming thing? I don't know. I'm kind of hoping it's real barracks. I've spent a little bit of time in barracks when I was in Army Cadets, doing things I shouldn't have done. Greetings from Germany, good. Some of my ancestors over there, relatives probably in Germany. I really need to do some more family history research on my German bit. Lewisham, nice. Wojciech, is that Wojciech? Okay. Virginia, nice. I've definitely been to Virginia. I loved it actually. Colorado Springs, nice. So War Dragon says my country's organising a HEMA tournament this year. Good idea, bad idea. It's an interesting year to run a HEMA tournament. I don't know. I'm not going to make a judgment call on that. As some of you will know, we've delayed Fight Camp. So Fight Camp was due to run in the middle of August, and we pushed it back to early October, and hopefully we can make it run in October. But It's a weird year for everyone. Gabe says, why are most fencing treatises that's used in HEMA Italian or German? Well, for the medieval sources, it's because that's what we've got. If you're looking at medieval sources, sort of 90% of them are German. As for why, that's a complicated question. But there you go. That's the answer to your question, is because that's what we've got. MK says Napoleonic Wars or nothing. So no Bannerlord for you, MK, then, I guess. Hi, Bob Crutch. South Africa, cool. I think you're kind of South Africa's kind of the same time zone to UK, I think. Norway, nice. I think 1 hour ahead, maybe. Netherlands, 1 hour ahead. Israel, awesome. Hello from Surrey. Who's that in Surrey? Is that someone I know in Surrey? Because I'm also in Surrey. South London, nice. I'm a West London boy, but South London's all right. I suppose technically I'm south of the river now. Total War Warhammer when? I've never actually played it, so possibly never, I'm afraid. Sorry. Wiltshire, Michigan, Costa Rica, Scotland, Missouri, St. Louis, Missouri, Lewis, Lancashire, Netherlands, Mexico, Brixham in Devon. Nice, I know that. I've stayed there actually a couple of times. Munich in Germany. I've been to München. Nice, I like it. Preston. Right, Texas, Iowa. Wow, all over. Like, we've got the whole world here. We've got 171 people, 177 people currently viewing. So, right, let's have a look at this. So, there's no super chats yet, so I'll keep on looking at the live chat. So Wayne Higgins says, hi Matt, I live in Sussex. Just wondering, do you think Sussex is a better place to be than the Midlands? For history, I mean. I'm from Leicester, I'm guessing. I personally would say yes, but I don't know Leicester terribly well. I've been there a couple of times, but Sussex has got tons of stuff. I love Sussex. A big part of my sort of ancestry is from both West and East Sussex, so I have taken an interest in the county, and there is lots there of interest, definitely. Okay, someone in Devon, the Devon side of the Anglo-Cornish border. Okay, Israel, nice. Uxbridge, awesome, just up the road from where I grew up. There's loads of Bulgaria, awesome. Illinois. Detroit, Austria, Canada, Sweden, Finland, Minnesota. Have I been to Florida? Have I been to Florida? I don't think I have. A lot of my family has lived in Florida, but I don't think I've ever been there. One of my best friends, Scott Brown, lives in Florida, so I will go there at some point, but no, I don't think I have been there. New Mexico, awesome. Alberta, Salisbury, yay, I love Salisbury. I'm a big fan of Salisbury Cathedral, incidentally. I'm sorry, I don't think the Salisbury Cathedral jokes will ever stop, even though it's not really funny, I guess, but there we go. Yeah, it's 9 o'clock in South Africa. Okay, so 1 hour ahead in South Africa. Cool. Right, shall we actually get on with some channel-related /HEMA/history / whatever martial arts related content now, instead of looking at people's locations? We've got just under 200 people currently viewing, so thank you so much for joining. I am very honoured to have you here. And Hellish Cart looks awesome. Okay, so I just have to address that. Several people have messaged me. I'm sorry if you ever send me a message incidentally and I don't reply to it, but honestly it's difficult, and I'm sure most YouTubers will say the same thing as this. It's difficult when you get a lot of messages because you just can't physically respond to them all, and it makes me feel really guilty because I do actually read a lot of them, but if you get into replying to all the messages, you just run out of time, and it really sucks. Actually, it makes me feel quite crappy because I'd love to be able to be able to respond to everything, but unfortunately I just can't. I've got to keep up with the videos and the editing and all the other stuff I do, family commitments and everything else. Just not possible, unfortunately. But A lot of people have messaged me asking about this hellish cart game that's obviously Polish saber fencing inspired, but you've got longsword, you've got rapier, you've got various things in there, and it looks awesome. It does look awesome, but I always reserve judgment based on playability, and we will see if it lives up to the hype. But it does look really good, I've got to admit. Bavaria, nice. Romania. All right, I'm reading locations again. Right, we've had 2 super chats come in, so I'm just going to address them so I don't get too far behind. So, Gun Griffin has asked, in South America they found Spanish combat rapiers, and I found paintings of the 30 Years' War with infantry carrying rapiers. I was wondering, were frontline armies issued rapiers at some point? That's a fairly easy one to answer. Yes. So for some reason on the internet, you often see people stating, as if they're certain of this as a fact, that that soldiers were never issued or never equipped with rapiers, and that rapiers are civilian swords. That's wrong. Okay. I'll caveat that slightly with, obviously we have to say, well, what is a rapier? And that is a hellish, to use the word hellish again, that is a hellish question, because you can't concisely define what a rapier is. But there is in the modern world a common perception of what a rapier is. It has some form of complex hilt, and it has a blade which is relatively narrow, relatively long, and relatively specialised towards thrusting. So it's not a true, it's not a typical cutting sword. It's something that's usually narrower than a medieval arming sword, for example. Substantially narrower and usually quite a bit longer. So if we accept that that's what a rapier is, 100% yes. Lots of armies in the 17th century particularly were armed very commonly with swords that we would know as rapiers. Even in the English Civil War, in the 30 Years' War, and not just infantry, but pikemen often wore swords that we would commonly call a rapier, but equally cavalry sometimes were armed with rapiers, and there are famous people whose swords survive, and we know that they carried those swords in combat, and those are rapiers. So 100% yes, rapiers were used in war as well as used in civilian combat. I've got a video which I've already filmed and edited and uploaded, which hasn't been published yet, but you will see very, very soon, where I do some more cutting with the White Arc Jian from LK Chen. And that has a blade which, if it was mounted on a swept hilt or a cup hilt, everybody would call a rapier. And I'll tell you, it cuts well, okay? So 100% rapiers can cut well as thrusting well, but even if they aren't great cutters, even if you have a rapier which is just a really good thruster, what's wrong with a thrusting sword as a battlefield weapon, Rapiers are large, heavy swords for the most part. They're pretty much always the same weight as a medieval arming sword, just in a different shape, just longer and narrower, and with good hand protection. So why not have them as a military sword? So there we go. Hopefully that will make the rapier people happy, but also that is truth. That is just historical truth. Yes, rapiers were used in war, and not only by the gentry, not only by officers, but also by cavalrymen, also by infantrymen. Right. Next super chat I've got sitting here for me is Jean Thron. I don't know how to pronounce it because I don't know the nationality of the name, but Jean Thrun maybe. In the context of mid to late 15th century arming sword, what blade thickness does a sword need to be effective against armour, and can arming swords be used for effective half-swording techniques? So the 2 questions there. The second one's really easy to answer. Yes, arming swords 100% can be used effectively for half-swording techniques, and in fact, almost certainly half-swording was first done with arming swords before long swords were even really a thing or common. So yes, half-swording can be done with arming swords, and we see half-swording done with the Langmesser as well. So yes, absolutely, you can half-sword with anything. And honestly, once you've got one hand on the hilt and one hand on the blade, it doesn't really matter that much how long the hilt is. In the context of mid to late 15th century arming swords, what blade thickness does a sword need to be effective against armour? It kind of doesn't really I mean, what do you mean effective against armor, I guess? I mean, if we're talking about thrusting through mail, I actually grabbed some mail for the purposes of this video. If we're talking about thrusting a point through mail, then it doesn't really matter what the thickness of the base of the blade is, just so long as you have sufficient rigidity to the blade. And as I've explained in some recent videos, although I can't remember if they're ones I've published because I've backloaded quite a lot of videos, it's to do with material in the blade. So stiffness in a blade is to do with the amount of material in the blade, and that doesn't have to be thickness of the steel. It can be to do with the width of the blade as well. So long as the blade's sufficiently stiff to thrust with, and it's got a pointy point on it, then you should be able to get through mail and whatever is underneath the armour, either the plate or the mail, so the arming doublet basically. Right, let's have a look at some other questions. So I'm just scrolling up now. Let's see. So Honourable Viking, is there such a thing? Is there such a thing as an Honourable Viking? I know that I've got a reputation for being a bit anti-Viking. It's just as a reaction to all the pro-Viking stuff. I was wondering how it is that you start a HEMA club or something similar. Well, in my case, this is probably fairly well documented because I've stuck it on my website, bios and that kind of stuff. So I started HEMA when I was in 1997, so I was about 20, 21. No, I was 20. I was doing Kung Fu and modern fencing at the time, and I was reading a martial arts magazine, and there was an article in there about what was at the time known as Western martial arts. So I became a student, and I was a student for a couple of years, and during that time I became aware of other sources and other weapons I could study, and I went off and basically formed a group with someone else, and that became the Exiles, which is another UK club. I was co-director of the Exiles with Rob Lovett for a year or two, and then ultimately I went off and formed Schola Gladiatoria. So basically I was already doing fencing and martial arts. I'd already been interested in that stuff for years. I've been doing archery since I was 11. I dabbled in reenactment as a teenager. I had very briefly dabbled in LARP, although I think I only went to about 2 or 3 events, maybe 3 actually, 3 events. But so I dabbled in related things, but as soon as I discovered that HEMA, or WMA as it was known then, was a thing, I got involved with that, and that became all-consuming. So there we go. And really I started a club because I wanted to study the sources I wanted to study. I never really wanted to be a teacher, incidentally. I just really wanted to just have a group of people who wanted to study the same sources as me and sort of do the research and do the training and that kind of stuff. Yeah, someone's recommending the Bluebell Railway and the Weald and Downland Open Air Museum. Yep, I can recommend both of those as well. Christopher Rowley says Wiltshire and Somerset has the best history in the UK. I don't know about that, actually. I don't want to start a kind of argument here. I've got to say Wales has it certainly for population size. Wales is intensely packed with history, both industrial, of course, but obviously castles. If you want to see castles, go to Wales. But Kent's pretty good. Kent and Sussex are pretty good for castles as well, but Wales is the best, I reckon. Mozoto is also saying, did you see the trailer for the Hellish Cart? Yes, I did. I haven't done an official reaction, but you can take this as that from... That's someone from China. Hey, China. Oklahoma, South Devon. Nice. Right. Sorry, I'm just reading through the... There's quite a lot of people in Devon here. I'm quite surprised because Devon doesn't have the world's densest population, yet there seem to be a lot of Devon people online right now. So thanks for joining me from Devon. I'm a big fan of Devon. Spend a lot of my life going on holiday there. So Garrett Medlin says, hey Matt, if in the UK you can only own a weapon if it's an antique, how can you buy modern reproduction swords? Well, that's not the case, Garrett. You can buy modern swords. I'm in America and very ignorant of British laws. So for anyone who doesn't know this, there's a worldwide perception that the UK's weapon laws are more draconian than they are. Actually, they're not that bad at all. They're similar to most of the rest of Europe, to be honest. We have some really stupid ones, and I make videos where I complain about them, which might give the impression that we have more draconian laws than we actually do. So apart from a few prohibited weapons, which include concealed things like sword sticks, which you can own antiques of, but not modern ones, punch daggers, knuckle dusters, there's a few things like this. We can basically own all swords. There was a few years ago an utterly ridiculous law brought in because gangs in British cities were using samurai swords to kill each other and hurt each other. And so the British government at the time thought, I know, we'll ban curved swords. They very quickly realised that the problem is that lots of things, there needs to be lots of exemptions for this. Now, in British law, they're not actually classed as exemptions, they're classed as defences, which unfortunately aren't quite as potent as an exemption. But basically, anyone who does martial arts or reenactment, or anything like that, anything sort of, a valid reason to want curved swords, can buy them. So, for example, when I import curved swords from abroad, and it's only a curved single-edged sword with a blade over 50 centimetres, so it's quite specific. But whenever I import one, I just have my insurance documents attached to the outside of the box, and it just comes straight to my door without any problem. So there's actually not very much problem. And for straight swords, and for any double-edged sword, even if it is curved, there's no law whatsoever. You can just buy them. So there we go. Hopefully that clears a few things up. So you can buy any antique swords, and you can buy almost all modern replica swords as well in the UK. And a lot of people talk about UK gun laws. We do have strict gun laws, but as you guys know, I shoot shotguns, rifles, black powder revolvers. I've got a lever action rifle. We can have semi-automatic shotguns. There's all kinds of firearms we can have. We just need to jump through the right hoops and get the right certification, firearm certificate, or shotgun certificate to own those things. Where the UK falls down in firearms ownership is on handguns. I would say, generally speaking, we can't own modern handguns. So we can own black powder handguns, but not modern handguns. But if you're willing to jump through enough hoops, you can in fact own modern handguns as well. For example, if you qualify as an armourer, so the people who supply the film industry or people who deactivate weapons, if you want to make it your job, you can basically own machine guns and mortars and every type of modern handgun, anything, fully automatic weapons. So the UK is draconian when it comes to guns, but it's not as bolted down as people think it is. There are ways that you can own these things legally if you're willing to jump through enough hoops. That was a very long answer, I understand, to one question, but it's one of those topics I think it is important to spread knowledge and information on this topic, because I see this come up again and again and again online about British weapon laws. But yeah, we do have ridiculous weapon laws. I don't want to say that we don't, but they're maybe not as stupid as people think they are, or they're not as tight as people think they are. Horrible bastard is just calling me bald, basically, as far as I can tell. Yeah, I am bald, well noticed. So James Name has asked an interesting question, which is probably something I'll put into a proper channel video at some point. What are my thoughts on greatsword versus armour, i.e. percussive damage? And obviously, yes, I know that they were advised against on the field of the cloth of gold because of the damage they can do to gauntlets. Absolutely correct. Henry VIII and the King of France decided not to have a fight with two-handed swords. Two-handed swords hit with a lot of force. What I would say is, if you really want to put an armoured person out of action just by hitting them, you're better off using a poleaxe or a halberd most of the time. But if you look at Landsknechts, actually, although they're often thought of as kind of unarmoured greatsword wielders, most Landsknechts were actually armed with halberds and pikes and guns and crossbows and sword and shield. Some Landsknechts were armed with these big two-handed swords, but actually if you look at the artwork, those guys with the big two-handed swords usually are wearing a fair amount of armor. They're not wearing full plate, but they're usually wearing kind of demi plate. And undoubtedly, yes, they did. If they did see an armored opponent, they would just whack them really, really hard. So yeah, they're not a thin sword edge is never the perfect thing to deal percussive damage. You know, something like a mace or a hammer or an axe is, or better. But a two-handed sword hits with a hell of a lot of force. Yeah, absolutely. So, 667 Gullin says, I've been to Guildford, Farnborough, Aldershot and Leeds. There's 4. I've been to all of those places as well. I used to live in Guildford. Yeah, so there's other people talking about UK weapon laws. Kingdom Come Deliverance, which I've only played fleetingly. I must admit I got a bit bored with it. There's other people answering Garrett's question for me. So sometimes, if I don't know anything about your question, I might skim over it. So apologies if I don't read your question out. That might be the reason. Rake says not even a rapier knows for certain if it's a rapier or not. Well, that's literally true. Yeah, so Brigadier 998 says that they saw an 1815 Waterloo source referring to a voltigeur officer fighting a rifles officer, the former with a rapier and the other with a broadsword. So an important thing to note regarding the word rapier is the word rapier means different things to different people at different times. And in the 18th century, the word rapier in most of Europe, certainly in England and France, literally meant a small sword. And sometimes that was extended to the military épée, which is essentially the military version of the small sword. Not quite a spadroon, it's an épée in French terminology. So when a source says a rapier versus a broadsword, that could mean a number of things, but it almost certainly means a small sword or an épée against, and now it could be a basket hilt broadsword, or just to confuse matters even further, it could be a sabre. Because if you look at Angelo, for example, broadsword is literally any sword that is broader than a small sword. So the word broadsword is applied to curved sabres as well. So there we go. My guess, being a rifles officer, is it's probably a small sword versus a sabre at that time. Chris H says, who cares where viewers are from? Well, that might be true, but I like to see where people are from. And I think that some people like to have their place of origin called out. That's my guess anyway. I'm just reading down the questions. Right. Orthopedic grips. So when I said that there was going to be a live stream, incidentally, there are 270 people currently watching this, at least. So thank you for joining us. There were 2 subjects that I said I was going to talk about here, so I'm going to talk about those in a minute. I see that I have Rascally Ryan. I see that I have a super chat in there. So thanks for the super chat. I will get to your question in a minute. So the first question, what do you guys think we should be bringing into historical fencing from modern fencing or modern sport? I could expand that even further to what do you think traditional martial arts, be it Tai Chi or be it Hema, be it Aikido, be it whatever, what do you think that we should bring from modern sport, like modern Olympic fencing, perhaps even Kendo is a difficult one because Kendo kind of is, I would class that more as a traditional martial art because they kind of stick to things being more or less the same. They don't continually change like modern fencing does. But what things should we bring in? Some people says, so Leonardo Bertamini says nothing. Potato Lover 273 says footwork. Joey Flores says the good footwork. from modern MMA, more wrestling and fighting on the ground and use of the dagger in those situations. So that's by Paul W. One thing I would say, so Paul W. So I would kind of say we already do that. So clearly in the relevant systems of HEMA, so you're not going to find it in small sword or saber or bayonet, but you do 100% find that in the medieval and Renaissance sources. And I would say that if you look at the medieval and Renaissance sources, the wrestling and the groundwork and stuff that you find there is really not so different from MMA. So I think probably what we should be bringing in for people who work with those sources and specialize in that stuff is maybe the modern ways of training it, the modern training equipment, and, you know, cross-training, I guess, because at the end of the day, wrestling is wrestling, isn't it? And unless you're fighting under specific rules like catch wrestling rules or Cornish hug wrestling rules or shin kicking or whatever you do, unless you've got some specific rules, if you're looking at kind of all out, kind of to the death, even if it's to submission wrestling and there are no other rules or minimal other rules, should we say, because obviously there are rules in MMA, then yeah, I guess we should be cross-training, shouldn't we? Because even if you want to wrestle in the style of, you know, I don't know, Passion or Peta or something, if you want to wrestle in a specific style, that's fine, but that doesn't mean your opponent's going to wrestle in that style. So you should probably, even if you're trying to stick to a particular system, you should probably cross-train wrestling with people from outside that system as well, because when you start wrestling someone to the death or even to submission, you don't know what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. Also, yep, so Jatrios says standards of fitness. I think this is the main thing, I think, that recreational hobbies like HEMA, which is what it is for most people, lack. And I think this is why most people have the perception, which I don't agree with, incidentally, based on my own experience, but most people have the perception that modern Olympic fencers, if they came into HEMA competitions, would just wipe the floor, which we know doesn't happen because they've done it. We've had some really quite good modern Olympic fencers come into HEMA and they don't wipe the floor. They do well, but they don't do like ridiculously well. But basically, yes, it's standard fitness, super important. But I would say that there are some super fit people in HEMA these days. Not to say it's the average, and definitely isn't. But yeah, I'd agree. If we can drive up the levels of fitness and where we set the bar, I guess, where we set the average bar, if we can take the average bar up a bit, yes, 100%, I agree with you, Jatrios or Jatrios. Aldous RW Reidenhaug, Hull, I don't know how to say that, sorry. The funding they receive would be nice. I mean, that's all about having an audience at the end of the day, isn't it? So funding comes from audiences. And I have to say, modern Olympic fencing has jack all funding as far as I can understand it. If we look at, over the years, I've had some involvement with some modern Olympic fencing equipment manufacturers like Leon Paul and Duelists and various others. And they are tiny companies that work out of small workshops, and they might be supplying Olympic teams, but they are not rich by any means. So unfortunately, even modern Olympic fencing, despite the fact it's an Olympic sport, just doesn't have much funding. If you're talking about real big funding, you're really looking at mainstream sports like golf and tennis and football and this kind of stuff. I can't see HEMA ever being there, unfortunately. It's just too fringe. So Reek of Death, incidentally, is in Denmark and currently making pizza. So thanks for tuning in while you're making pizza. I actually had pizza for lunch today, so well done. So let's look at some other suggestions from people. So quite a few people are saying grappling. We do have loads of grappling in. I think it's just that I think people fixate so much on swords and weapons in HEMA, particularly on YouTube channels like mine and the other people out there, like people like Scalagrim and people who actually do HEMA. And incidentally, I've noticed some people refer to HEMA YouTube channels when they're talking about some channels of people who don't really do HEMA. So much though I love some of those other channels, there are actually a relatively few of us who are making regular videos, who are actually doing HEMA. But Scal is one of them, and certainly has been one of them. I don't know if he's regularly training at the moment, but he certainly has been. But what I was going to say, and I've gone off the point yet again, but the point was, I think that for people who are actually in HEMA, I think there is quite a lot of grappling. It's just that it's not represented that well. It's not sort of championed by any particular of the YouTubers. So maybe a lot of you guys don't realise how much grappling and wrestling stuff there is going on in HEMA, because it's not shown that much in our content. I'm not a grappler personally, so I don't talk about it much because I don't want to talk about things I know so little about, generally speaking. But it is on my list to try and get some experts on, meet up with people and get that represented a bit better on the channel. Let's see what else we've got here. So the pistol grip. So I posted this picture earlier of some people would call it an orthopedic grip, some people would call it pistol grip. In actual fact, so that picture, Joshua, who may or may not be online here, if you are here, Joshua, thank you very much for sharing that, because it gave me a whole bunch of ideas, and it's been shared around everywhere, and I hope you're happy with the amount that it's been shared, because it's got a lot of interest, both love and hate, incidentally. But Joshua interestingly said, I assumed that Joshua Shuvalov, I assumed that the grip that he made had been inspired by modern fencing grips, but actually he clarified it was inspired by modern target pistol grips, which of course, looking at it, I should have realised, not that I've ever done modern target pistol, but I do shoot traditional pistols, and I should have recognised it as a pistol grip rather than a fencing, modern fencing grip. So first of all, I'll say, I kind of feigned disgust at this thing, and I made the joke about, he's killed HEMA, and this is a meme that just runs and runs and runs about people killing HEMA. But obviously HEMA hasn't actually been killed, and it makes actually no difference to anything. It's just someone is having fun with designing a new type of grip. And as I pointed out on the Scholar Facebook page, this is actually part of a tradition. People in the 19th century were doing this. So, Colonel Fox invented the 1908 pattern sword grip with gutta percha, which is basically a rubber, and kind of sculpted it himself. So, 100%. And, we've got finger rings, we've got thumb rings, we've got bulges in the grip for the finger to go over, we've got leather loops to put the lead finger through, we've got things like the 1903 US infantry officer's sabre, which actually has finger grooves, which various Italian sabres also had. So, who the hell cares? You can make a grip, especially in the 19th century. They were making all manner of funky shaped grips. And fundamentally, what Joshua made, functionally, is like a combination of two things. It's like a combination of having a finger ring or a finger bulge or a finger loop, all of which were things, and a combination of a thumb ring without the top of the ring. Many HEMA swords can't have thumb rings because of the gloves we wear for safety reasons. So in actual fact, what's the problem really? I think what Joshua did was good craftsmanship, is very interesting. I'd quite like to know what it's like to use one of those things actually. I personally wouldn't want it on a basket hilt, but I'd quite like it on a sabre, because why not? But there we go. I think generally speaking though, I'm not a fan of bringing those sort of modern things into HEMA in a widespread sense, because then what are we doing? Then we're just doing modern sport fencing again with a heavier sword, aren't we? Which might be its own thing. That might be fine to do. But I think if we're doing historical martial arts with historical swords, then we should use something that has a historical precedent. And I think this is slightly outside of that sphere. So there we go. Ubufel, I don't know how to say your name, I'm sorry, Ubufel, says modern comfy shoes. 100% yes. I'm not one of the people who is always saying that we should be using historical footwear when we do historical fencing. The argument I've also made is because we don't do historical fencing on historical floors. We don't, most of us are training in gym halls. We're not training on whatever type of flooring they were training on most of the time. But, modern comfy shoes. Do they make a difference? Yeah, they do. You got more tread, you got more traction, you can lunge deeper, you can recover quicker. Yes, there are advantages to it. So personally, I try to train in very thin, flat-soled shoes that tend to not have much tread or too much grip on them. So they're safe, but they're not ridiculous. They're not a million miles different from historical shoes. So I'm just looking at other suggestions. So Jesse Hardin says more strength and conditioning training like other sports. Yep, fitness, strength. Real Zeratul says the protective gear, but not the scoring system, please. Yeah, I can say we already do that. Basically, we already have our own rules, even if they are inspired somewhat by modern fencing. But our protective gear, I mean, I make this point over and over and over again, but honestly, when people bang on about historical shoes, but then they're doing longsword fencing in fencing masks which weren't common objects until about the year 1790 or 1800, I'm sorry, but the way that we do longsword fencing now is really different to the way that they did longsword fencing in the 15th and even 16th centuries. So the fact is we just got to accept a lot of what we do is a historical fencing version or take on historical fencing with historical fencing techniques. But the protective gear we wear is, for the most part, really, really modern, especially fencing masks. And fencing masks change so much. So just seeing what other suggestions there are here. Aogar says exercises and training methodologies. Yeah, so nail on the head there. So I would say particularly in modern Olympic fencing and translating whatever's useful there over to historical fencing, it is the training methods, perhaps the training mentality, some of the actual literal exercises. You can take a foil exercise or a modern fencing, any modern fencing exercise, and translate it to historical weapons. Absolutely fine. And I've done that ever since the beginning. You've got to bear in mind, I started modern fencing when I was 16. I didn't start historical fencing until I was 19, 20. So, 20 in fact. So yeah, 100%, I fenced at school, I fenced at university, and I fenced after university. So 100%, I've always done that, and I wouldn't criticize anyone else for doing that. I am commonly perceived as someone who just slags off modern fencing all the time, and I don't. And it's partly from a position of the fact that I wish that modern fencing had not taken some of the decisions that it had. But I have a lot of time for modern Olympic fencing, and I always say to people, if you can't get to a HEMA club but you want to learn swordsmanship, do modern fencing. Okay, I say that over and over and over again. But yeah, there's tons that we can usefully take from modern Olympic fencing without polluting or without damaging what we do in historical fencing. So 667 Gullin says HEMA needs a better way to implement pole arms. 100% agree. Yes. Yeah. What do we do? I don't know what we do about it. The problem is pole arms have too much leverage, and the only thing you can do to make the pole arms safer is make them lighter. But if you make them lighter, then they don't handle like the pole arm anymore. So really difficult. So Ryan Smith says, where's Lucy? Honest answer, she's dyeing her hair, I think. So basically, when I said I'm going to be doing a live stream, she was like, yay, evening off. Don't have to spend time with Matt anymore. No, she might duck in actually, but I don't know whether she will or not. So TRSHBRNR1 says, I hate that suicide fighters are allowed to score in modern fencing. I agree. I think HEMA scoring should be invoked in regards to scoring hits in modern fencing. I agree. I 100% agree. So what a lot of us have done with historical fencing rules are based on the fact that many of us are from a modern fencing background. Loads of us who run HEMA clubs have done, or in some cases still do, modern fencing. And a lot of the decisions we make in historical fencing or HEMA are based on the things we don't like in modern fencing. So, Ivan says, what's happened to Oz? Is he okay? Yes, he is fine, but he's just not doing HEMA anymore. So he's absolutely fine, but he's just doing other things. Some of you may know that he wrecked his knee doing wrestling, and at a wrestling event, and it took a long time to recover. Oh.
You said wrestling.
I did say wrestling, and look who's just... And as if by the magic word was uttered, and as if by magic, Lucy's appeared behind me. So, yeah, I was just explaining where Oz has been and the fact that Oz has got an injured knee and just basically gone away from HEMA. But he's very, he's happy and doing other things, and he's got a new baby to look after at the moment. So,
cool.
yeah. So he's all good. Yeah.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah. So just to explain to you guys, there's a delay between what I'm filming and what I see behind me. So I've literally just seen Lucy walk in on the screen in front of me. It's very weird to get my head around. So I try to ignore the screen because it's about a minute behind what I'm actually doing and saying. Led Zepp 331 says you should bring in the body odor for authenticity. We do. Like, have you never been in a HEMA club? Oh my god, the body odor. I reckon for body odor, HEMA clubs have other sports beat hands down. Largely because we've got fencing masks and HEMA jackets, which are really difficult to clean. Both of them are really difficult to clean effectively, so they do get stinky. And I've got to say, one of the greatest things about being a YouTuber is that people send me new masks, new jackets every now and again to review. So when my jackets and masks get too horribly stinky, I can throw them away. So Daniel Taylor says, how are the children doing? They're doing very well, thank you very much. Both sleeping soundly in bed. Right, I have a couple of super chats that I must address before I go on. So Rascally Ryan, thank you for your super chat, Rascally, or Ryan. Says, have you seen the 1985 Rutger Hauer film Flesh and Blood? Oh yes, I have. And your thoughts on it? It's great fun. It's brilliant in a amazingly 80s cheesy way. And no, I really like it. The weapons and the armor, etc. So actually, they're not bad. So I suppose it's supposed to be set in a sort of imaginary 16th century, maybe middle of the 16th century kind of time. And some of the armor is horrifically bad. But on average, for a 1980s sword and whatever kind of movie, it's not bad, I suppose. It gives the impression of the 16th century. The one annoying thing is the use of the name Hawkwood, who of course alludes to a very famous mercenary captain from the 14th century. So, like, they could have chosen any name. Why pick one of the most famous mercenary captains' names from 200 years earlier? That's the only thing that annoys me. But in terms of... There's not actually very much fighting in it, is there? But in terms of the weapons and the armour, yeah, pretty good. I love the fact they've got a Zweihander in there. Yeah, so Ryan, you said it's one of the few movies that you've seen a man catch a polearm used in. Yeah, absolutely. Right, couple of other super chats in here as well. Gun Griffin says, late, I guess, but in the US, black powder firearms are not considered firearms. I know. I'm jealous of many things in US weapons legislation. Not everything, but a lot of things. They're not considered firearms, but antiques and everyone, including felons, can own them without any paperwork. I know. I mean,
even felons didn't know that.
Yeah, to me, I'm not going to get into a US. I am old enough and white-haired enough to know to not get into a US gun law related debate online. But to me, that seems interesting, especially as anybody who knows about black powder firearms, particularly revolvers, actually, knows that once it's loaded, it's functionally no different to a modern revolver. Yeah, you can't reload it as quickly unless you happen to have a 1858 what's it called? Not Adams. Remington. There we go. A Remington 1858. Then you can quite quickly change the cylinders. So actually, you can reload pretty damn quickly because you just have loads of preloaded cylinders. But yeah, it seems really crazy because a black powder gun functionally does the same thing as a modern gun. Okay, so it's slightly less powerful, debatably, but something like a Colt Walker or a Colt Dragoon has got just as much muzzle energy as a modern handgun, as a 9mm has. Anyway, Yes, it's an interesting thing, but black powder pistols are for most people, most modern shooters in the UK, are the only pistols we can still legally get our hands on, unless we can also get ones which have an extended barrel and an extended stock at the back, which look really, really stupid, but you can get modern pistols of that type because it's a kind of loophole in the law because they have stocks attached. So Scott McGregor, thank you for your super chat. You say, if I recall correctly, you do personally do some rapier. I'll answer this in a question in a minute. If so, what style? And do you know of Robert Childs, a long-time American rapier fencer? So I know of his name. I don't really know him at all as a person, but I know of the name. Yeah. Do I do any rapier? No.
He does.
Lucy's off camera,
but he does fence rapier, but he doesn't do rapier.
I dabble. So no, I mean I've attended rapier classes and stuff, but no, I don't really do rapier. If I did do rapier, just to annoy people, I'd do Swetnam. Because everyone else in the UK does either Spanish Destreza, or Tibo, which is essentially Destreza, or they do, loads of people do Italian rapier.
Swetnam a terrible person?
Swetnam was known as Swetnam the woman hater.
So a terrible person from my
But he was a terrible person if you were a woman.
Well, so given that is a fact.
No, but that's what I mean. Swetnam is a controversial because his. No, I know who I'd do. I'd go and do. I would either do French rapier with Rob Runacres or the Duke of Newcastle, because they're both outside of the norm. So basically what I'm saying is if I did do rapier, I'd have to do hipster rapier. I don't want to be doing any of that normal Italian rapier or the Spanish rapier. No, I want to do hipster rapier. So if I ever do become a rapierist, it's gonna be English, French, or something really left field, something really weird. Yeah, there we go. We've got one other super chat, but I'm having trouble seeing it. I always have.
It doesn't let you scroll down to the.
Oh, here we go. So Chase Eckerson says, "Are you familiar with the Iberian hilted, crab-hilted sword?" So I know what crab-hilted rapiers and left-hand daggers and other. And there's a type of two-handed sword as well. Most have type 19 blades. I was curious, do you think these are civilian swords or good for battlefield? So the short answer is no. I'm not actually sure of the precise type of sword you're asking about. So if it's a type 19 blade, it's basically a side sword-ish blade, late medieval. I'm not really sure, no. I don't really know those. I do know various crab-hilted rapiers and even left-handed daggers, but no, I'm not sure about this sword. But from the description, Chase, it sounds like a kind of side sword. In terms of your question, though, I think I can probably guesstimate an answer. Do I think they were civilian swords or good for the battlefield? Well, if they're crab-hilted and they've got a Type 19 blade, sounds kind of side sword-ish, I'd say either. To me, they just sound like sidearm swords. So, yeah, I think they'd be fine for the battlefield if I've understood what they are exactly. Right, I'm aware of the... so Sapcan says, hi, Lucy.
Hi.
Daniel Taylor says, hi, Lucy.
Hi. John says it's Oz still magnet fishing. I don't think he's done it since the baby was born, but that is still a thing that he enjoys.
He still thinks about it.
He still would like to be magnet fishing.
So Petru says, what opinion do I have about Goedendags, which means good morning or good day, and it's a Flemish weapon that's basically a large heavy stick with a spike on the end.
That sounds cool.
Which, what more can you want?
Is it like a mace?
Yeah, kind of. It's like a poor man's mace. So it's a, let's say, about 6 foot long. It's like a very heavy quarterstaff that's bigger at one end, usually iron shod and then with a spike at the end. So you can use it as a spear or a pike, or you can just whack people really, really hard with it. And basically, I think what's greatest about the Goedendag, apart from the fact that basically anyone could make one and no one could prohibit them.
Can we make one?
Huh? Should we make a Gurdendag? Should we? So let's vote for that, guys. Would you like to see Matt and Lucy make a Gurdendag? We could even get the wood from one of the trees in the garden, couldn't we? We've actually chopped down some trees recently.
Yeah.
We could make a Gurdendag out of one of those.
Can I also try and make just a traditional mace?
And we could test it on helmets and armour and stuff.
Nice.
Should we do it? Should we go full Todd? We'll go full Todd and test a weapon on everything we can think of. We could get a dead animal and beat it repeatedly with a Gurdendag. No, right.
They can't see my expression right now.
Yeah, let's do that. So we're going to make a Gurdendag. So thanks for that suggestion. I think they're great, and I think they also, one of the things I love about them is they demonstrate how ridiculous most weapons are from history, because so much time and effort goes into making other weapons when you could have just made a Gurdendag, because a Gurdendag it's better than most swords, it's better than some polearms.
His opinion on it is that it's really cool.
It's just a really big stick with a spike on the end. Like, what?
I was going to say that we do generally like big sticks.
It's basically going to beat most of the weapons, and all it is a big stick with a spike on the end. I love it. Right, sorry, how's Oscar doing? How is Oscar doing?
Yeah, it's great. He kept getting beaten up by the people's cats, but I think they've finally given up.
There's been a bit of a turf war between the cats, unfortunately, so Oscar's been a bit down in the dumps. MK says, get the port. Your wish is my command. Shall we pour some port out?
Run out of port.
We never run out of port, Lucy.
Oh.
I just don't let you know that there's more port. No, so I've got the port here. We've got some Graham's 2013 late bottled vintage. So I'm going to pour some of this out, and Lucy and I are going to share some port. There we go.
Nice.
You never say no to port, do you?
No.
No. Who would say no to port? There's my opinion on Gurdendags. Right. Release the Tiger.
That may have been...
Have you guys seen Tiger King?
Oh my god.
That is the best thing I've seen on TV this year, is
good.
Tiger King. Joe Exotic, what a man. Well, what a criminal, but fascinating stuff.
I mean, you'd like to know him.
Yeah. Sorry, I'm just reading down questions. You'll have to excuse me for going silent sometimes, but I have to catch up with the reading.
This is why you needed me sitting there and scrolling.
Yeah. 667 Gullin, I have to say, you are excelling yourself this evening with good points and questions. Hema needs to use more armour. I mean, assuming you mean we need more armoured combat, I 100% agree. And everyone knows the limitation, the constraint to that is the cost of the bloody stuff. But it's not only the cost of the stuff. I've owned 2 harnesses. In fact, I still own 2 harnesses. And getting everything to work just right, and getting all of the accessories working, and the arming doublet working right with the armour and everything else, it can be a challenge. And armour, a lot of people who've never worn armour don't realise this, but even really well made, really well fitted, good quality armour is a pain in the butt to wear. It's hot and sweaty. It's uncomfortable after a certain amount of time. You do feel certain hard hits in certain places. You might not get cut or stabbed by those things, but it's not this magical kind of like anime version of armour that people necessarily think it is. So it requires a real amount of dedication to get into armoured fighting. But yes, it would be great to see more of it in HEMA.
Marcus's question needs answering.
Lucy's here to help now. Lucy's much quicker at reading than I am.
Marcus has said, "Are the swords back there currently available on your store?" I think you need to clarify that they're your best friends. So
unfortunately, the swords behind me, and I've got more swords that you can't see up here, and I've got more swords over here you can't see. They unfortunately are my collection. And after we moved house, for a long time, my collection was living in storage in lockers and stuff, and I didn't get to see them for ages. So we've been reunited. So unfortunately, no. Currently, none of the. I have to say there are some swords which are going to be for sale, but you can't see them at the moment. They're tucked away around behind that cabinet. So I'm actually taking a break. You will have noticed I'm taking a break from selling at the moment for various reasons, but in August, I should be putting some new stock up back on the site. I've got tons of stuff to sell. I just don't really have the time to process it and stuff at the moment. So,
I like Daniel Taylor's question.
Daniel Taylor?
How can you be white-haired when you have no hair? He's got very little imagination.
So Daniel Taylor, how can I be white-haired when I have no hair? I do have hair, but I shave it off.
He shaves it.
So this is what everyone doesn't realise, is that if I didn't shave my head, I would have a massive head of hair, wouldn't I?
Absolutely.
No, obviously I get hair on the sides and I've got facial hair, and it's unfortunately all going Gandalf white. I seem to have skipped grey and gone straight from dark brown to white.
It's very distinguished.
It's very annoying.
We've got another super chat. Your face is on pause. It's over this side of the screen.
Super chats. No, I'm reading. Yeah, I will. Sorry, I will get to the super chat in a second. I'm just catching up with the normal chat section.
I feel like you need hold music.
Okay, so we're still talking about US gun laws. Why does that not surprise me? Damn it! Why did I fall into that trap?
No.
Yeah, it's a complicated matter. I hate UK gun laws. They make no sense whatsoever, incidentally. And I wish I could probably have, if not US gun laws, probably more like Canadian gun laws or something like that. Even French gun laws are better than the UK's. Anyway, I say even French like a bad way. But what I'm saying is Europe as a whole, like France and Germany, have okay gun laws. They're not great, but they're better than UK's. Right. Law, yeah, the Scholar General says laws are rarely based on logic. Quote for truth right there, 100%. It's all politics and posturing, most of it. How have I got hoodwinked into... Right, let's move on. Okay, so Ryan Smith says Flesh and Blood says 1501 at the start. That's interesting. Okay. Well, then the weapons and the armour are a little bit too late for 1501. I would say it looks more like 1550-ish. At the earliest, maybe 1530, 1540. So someone said Mauser C96. What's the question about a Mauser C96? They're nice pistols. Winston Churchill had one, I think. It's a broom handle Mauser. It's what Han Solo uses, basically. Did you not know that? Han Solo's pistol is a broom handle Mauser with bits stuck on it. Which is a end of the 19th century.
You probably shouldn't communicate just with facial expressions off camera.
Yeah. So Lucy, you need to talk louder as well because the microphone's stuck to my face.
Does that mean that when you drink port, they get a really, really fun sound?
So Doc the Armoured Rhino says, "What's my store?" I clearly haven't advertised it enough. So it's Eastern Antique Arms, which is a very easy to find web address, which is antique-swords.co.uk. But I'm afraid there's not very much on there at the moment because I've just sold most of my stock and I haven't been putting new stock on. But you can look at the sold section and you can see a couple of hundred things that I've sold before. Some quite nice swords in there you can ogle. So Bob Crutch says there is full contact fighting on YouTube in armour. There is.
Do we want to watch it?
So, unfortunately, I have a lot of respect for the people that do that, full contact, like HMB and Battle of the Nations and that kind of stuff. And, I know people who do that. And some of them do HEMA as well. But it's not what armoured fighting really should look like. And that is a good segue. Lucy wants the port. That is a good segue onto the second topic that I said we would talk about. And that is... how did people use swords in armour? Right, so to connect to how do these two things connect together about the full contact fighting that is done in Battle of the Nations and HMB and Bohurt and Buhurt and all of that kind of stuff. What is the difference? Well, the fundamental difference is that if we look at the treatises and how they fight in armour in the treatises, they're largely defeating the opponent by bypassing the armour. So the general rule is, if you take your nice sharp arming sword or longsword like the Albions up there, and you smash them into someone's helmet, you're not going to achieve very much other than damaging the edge of your sword. Which, it's a sword, it's a tool, it's there to hit people with, which is fine. I'm not too worried about edge damage. But you're not going to do anything to win the fight. admittedly, if you use a really large and heavy sword, and a lot of the swords they use in the full contact armored fighting that you can watch on YouTube and elsewhere, they do use somewhat, for their size, somewhat heavy and obviously thick blunt-edged swords. They're essentially steel clubs, and they're not really using them like swords. They're not cutting and they're not thrusting. And in fact, specifically in the rules of that type of fighting, the modern recreated fighting, you're not allowed to thrust, you're not allowed to stab, you're not really allowed to grapple, you're not allowed to do any of the kind of grappling techniques or kind of like like arm bars and arm locks and this kind of stuff. And you're not allowed to do half swording as far as I'm aware. So there's a whole bunch of things you're not allowed to do. So you're not really allowed to do in that modern recreated full contact fighting. You're not allowed to use your weapon really like a weapon. You're not really allowed to use it how you would use it if you were trying to kill or incapacitate an opponent in armor. So what do the treatises show? Well, the treatises show use of the point predominantly, so use of the point thrust into gaps in plate armor. And they show grappling of various sorts, and they show ground fighting, they show throws, they even show removing of armor, so they show removing of helmets, lifting of visors to stab into the face, they show thrusting into the back of the gauntlet, into the palm of the hand, the back of the knee, anywhere there's an opening in the armor or a gap in the plates. They even show removing of cutting of the strap. In Paulus Cal, there's cutting of the points so you can get the shoulder armor off to then stab the person in the torso. So basically it's trying to get around the armour, and that's a sort of acknowledgement, as you've seen on Todd's channel, when he shoots armour with various crossbows and longbows. It's really difficult to get past plate armour. So the treatises get past it by getting past it, by not just bashing the armour, as you see in modern full contact sports, but by not attacking the armour, but by attacking the person. So stabbing in gaps, grabbing, breaking people's joints, grappling them, pulling off the armour, throwing them on the floor, this kind of stuff. There is a caveat to that, and that is if your striking weapon becomes potent and powerful enough that with a simple strike it can incapacitate or break someone's bones or whatever. So with certain very percussive weapons, halberds, poleaxes, maces, flails maybe, things like this, you can just hit someone really, really hard, and by hitting them so hard in the head, it will maybe break their neck or knock them out or just wrench their neck. If you hit them in the leg or the arm, it might break a bone in their limb, make them fall over. If you hit them in the torso, it might just knock them over. And this is alluded to in Fury's poleaxe section, where he says, I'm going to hit this guy 3 times with my poleaxe. And if he doesn't fall over, then I'm going to grab him by the visor, pull his visor open and mash his face in, stab him in the face or whatever. So with powerful enough striking weapons, you can just hit the armour. But with a sword, things like the arming sword and the longsword behind me, they're just not good percussive weapons. They don't hit with a lot of force, which is why in HEMA we can wear simple padded armour and fencing masks and hit each other with longsword feathers and not be breaking bones and knocking each other out on a regular basis, because they're actually not very good percussive weapons. They rely on cutting and thrusting. They're sharp weapons. So, bringing this back to the question that I said we were going to lead with, and that is, how did people use swords? And I'm going to grab one down here, I've conveniently put here. How did people use swords like this kind of 11th, 12th century Brazil nut pommeled arming sword in the age of mail, where you've got head to foot mail and a helmet, and indeed once you get into the 13th century you've got the coat of plates, and you've got the beginnings of plate armour, bits of plate armour sometimes on bits of the arms and legs. And the simple answer is we don't really know, because we don't have any treatises, we don't have any combat treatises from before the 14th century. And of course, in the 14th, by the time that the treatises come along, we've already got plate armour. So how did they fight in armour with one of these and a shield when they predominantly were wearing mail, chainmail, head like this, from head to foot, with padding underneath? And it does seem that for the large part, what they did was probably not dissimilar to what they do in the modern sporting full contact armoured fighting. They probably just bashed each other with the swords. But where possible, they aimed for less armoured points. They probably aimed for parts of the body that they knew they would have the most effect on. So if someone's wearing a great helm over the top of a chevalier, which is like a proto bassinet, so they've basically got two helmets on their head, like a bucket, and then they've got padding and mail over their entire body, including mitten gauntlets and mail chausses on their legs and on their feet. You're probably going to aim for the bits of the body that you think you might do the most damage to with your sword. So yes, thrusting, you can get a point through mail, although you've then got to question, why in the age of mail did they not bring pointier swords in earlier? We don't know. We simply don't know. So the swords seem to be mostly geared towards hacking and cutting. Why did they stay with cutting and hacking swords in a period when certainly knights and men-at-arms were so well armoured against cutting and hacking? Probably, like I say, they aimed for bits of like elbows and knees and places where you were going to cause the most impact damage. But then why use a sword at all? Why weren't maces and axes more popular in that period? Why were swords still so popular? I think it has to also come down to my favourite word as well, context. And that is in the 13th, 11th, 12th, 13th centuries, the majority of the people on the battlefield were probably, for the most part, levies. They were levied troops sometimes from the countryside, sometimes from towns. And most of them were armed with some form of polearm or a crossbow or longbow, if it was in England or some other countries. And they weren't armoured. And I think for the large part, probably, certainly in the age of chivalry, in the sort of high age of chivalry of the kind of 11th, 12th, 13th centuries, the majority of people using swords like this were knights, as we would call them, or men-at-arms, who were heavily armoured. And when they defeated another knight, they often didn't kill them. They took them prisoner. And we see this in the Crusades as well. And this was convention not just in Christendom, but also in the Islamic world as well. And we repeatedly see people captured and ransomed in European warfare and in warfare in the so-called Holy Land in the Middle East and North Africa. And I think that for the large part, the fully armoured people, the people wearing all the armour, simply weren't often getting badly injured. People like Sir William Marshall were fighting in countless tournaments and taking people prisoner and ransoming them, and they were living to tell the tale. They were living to fight another day. But when it came to actual warfare and killing the enemy, the majority of the enemy weren't armoured. And so these sorts of swords, much like the katana and the tashi in Japan, probably, unfortunately, for a lot of the time, these were used for hacking up unarmoured or almost unarmoured levy soldiery, basically militias, who were poorly equipped, poorly armed, poorly trained, poorly motivated. And the knights and the men-at-arms, the people who had all the full armour, for the most part, weren't killing each other. They were capturing each other, knocking each other out, subduing them, and ransoming them. So ironically, I started off by saying that the full contact armoured fighting that we see today in sporting contexts is very unlike armoured fighting. True, if we're talking about the 14th and 15th century, but possibly it's quite similar to the type of fighting we saw in the 12th and 13th, 11th, 12th and 13th century. And some people within the full contact community recognise that, and I have seen people explicitly state that the plate armour worn in full contact modern sporting combat is basically just for protection, for added protection, but the type of combat they're doing is actually more representative of the 12th and 13th century. And I can live with that. I can agree with that, and that makes total logical sense. Right.
I'm going to allow that.
Lucy's going to allow that. That was a very long explanation. Now, I've realised I've been talking non-stop now for quite a long time. I'm now going to look at your comments and see what you say in response to that. If you agree, disagree, if you have
some super chats for you.
I do have some super chats. Let's see. So,
I think
So Scott McGregor says, have I seen the game Hellish Cart? So yeah, I've seen the same trailer that everyone else has seen. It looks really good. I'm holding out for it. Let's hope it is good. So Jake Me says, a simple answer to my white hair problem is grow a wizard beard.
Oh, Jake is wrong.
Jake's wrong, according to my
Sorry,
wife.
Jake.
I'm sorry, Jake. So I used to have a beard, a big black beard that did sort of have some white badger-like stripes in it. Some of you, if you Google on the internet hard enough, will find pictures of me with a beard. I looked like Ming the Merciless
He looked like a
in
man
Flash Gordon.
eating a badger.
I looked like a man eating a badger or Ming the Merciless. In my mind, I looked like Ming the Merciless, and I was fine with that. But no, apparently I'm not allowed to have a beard anymore. I mean, if I really, really desperately wanted a beard, you'd let me have one, wouldn't you?
Yeah, if you desperately wanted one, but you don't.
But I actually don't. The
No.
problem is it just makes me look 10 years older than
No.
I want to look. I was going to say it makes me look
Grow
10
your
years older than I
sideburns
am.
again,
But
they were cool.
Lucy wants me to grow my pointy sideburns back, and I did love my pointy sideburns, but the problem is I get all this white hair, and it just ages me. I don't want it.
Just for men, for sideburns. I'm
I'm not saying that, I want to look like a kid, but I don't want to make myself look even more ancient than I actually already am. Right. Ming Easton, I like it. Tim the Enchanter. Oh my God, that's a Monty Python reference. Yeah, yes, I probably would look like. So Gabriel wants to know whether mutton chop's coming back.
See, I think that they should.
That's the funny thing. So Lucy
should...
doesn't want me to grow a beard, but I'm allowed to grow mutton chops.
I'm just not a
But the
beard
thing is,
fan.
I wanted to grow mutton chops and then connect them with a
No,
moustache, like
not a
full
moustache.
Flashman style, but I'm not allowed that, apparently. It's simply because Lucy's dad has a moustache and she doesn't want to mix us up. Oh, Gabriel really wants me to bring the sideburns back. Maybe I will.
Maybe listen to Gabriel.
Maybe I'll do lockdown sideburns.
You so should.
Take Fu Manchu, take him into the laboratory. 667 Gullin has been on a roll tonight. Ming the Merciless is not a bad look. I agree. I think I've got to say, Ming the Merciless's daughter was the high point of Flash Gordon for me. I think Flash Gordon chose the wrong woman, but there we go. What do you think? I forgot that Lucy's sitting there. Right. You could get Lucy to dye my whiskers for me. Would that even work? Wouldn't that dye my skin?
Well, is my skin dyed? I mean, I've literally just dyed it, so it probably.
Oh
is
my
slightly,
God!
But
Could you dye my sideburns?
yeah, the contrast would look really stark between your skin and them, so they would look dyed. They wouldn't look natural, but I could dye them. Yeah.
Should we do it? Should we do it for a
I've got
laugh?
like a fuck ton of different dyes upstairs.
A fuck ton,
Yeah.
the official measurement
Yeah.
known as a fuck ton.
So you can basically have the blacky blue that my hair is at the moment, or purple that it used to be.
They call me Tim. Lucy loves Monty Python so much. I like. Did you notice I started saying something there and then decided not to? Very occasionally.
That's really good,
I know
isn't
this
it?
is personal development. I'm very, as I've got older,
You managed to stop yourself.
I'm now literally able to stop myself mid-sentence, which I could never
Someone
do
just
before.
did a sad face.
Oh, here's a good question. This is a good Italian name here. Il Bugiardo dell'Umbria. So from Umbria. I don't know what Bugiardo means, but the something of Umbria. I've been on holiday in Umbria. It's absolutely gorgeous.
His question?
Yes. Hi, Matt. Aesthetically speaking, what's your favourite armour of all time? I will talk about type of armour rather than one specific armour. But this might surprise some of you. But in recent years, I have a growing love for the Kastenbrust. That is the casket chest, the German armour of the 1430s and 1440s and into the 1450s, with a very long tonlet fold that flares out, and an angled box chest that looks like something off the front of a Panther tank, and then a big great bassinet that comes all the way down to. I just love them. I think they're really, really cool. I've got to say also, not just because I'm English, but I do really like English armour because it combines the overall silhouette of an Italian armour-ish, but with some fluting and some different some asymmetry. I like asymmetry as well. I like a bigger pauldron on the left than on the right and this kind of stuff. So definitely, hold on, Lucy's about to ask me a question. Wait your turn. 15th century armour. And I do like a good old Milanese, a classic Milanese harness as well. There are so many armour. How do I choose the best?
One in the Wallace collection that's in the corner of the room. In the corner of, it's like in the room with, and it's an unusual colour.
I'll be honest, I'm actually not that keen on any particular armour in the Wallace collection.
It's one in the Wallace collection. It's in the corner of a room.
So I've seen the whose armour is it? Is it Archduke Ferdinand or something? The famous armour in the in the Art History Museum in Vienna. I can't remember who is it Sigismund or Archduke no, I can't remember now. I can't remember whose armour it is, but it's absolutely gorgeous armour, but it's not my cup of tea. So a lot of people love Gothic, high Gothic, sort of 1480s, 1490s, 1500 German harness. It doesn't really do it for me, so I like it in engineering terms, but aesthetically it's not really my cup of tea. Paul C. Robertson says, who was the Englishman who got an arrow in his face when he raised his visor? There are actually quite a lot of them. I mean, Henry V got shot in the face, but we don't know that he was raising his visor. We don't know whether he even had a helmet on at all. He may have had an open face helmet, so I don't know. But there were people in the Wars of the Roses who also got arrows in the face. There was also, I think it was the Earl of Salisbury, got hit in the face with a poleaxe when he looked out of a window during the, I think, Battle of St Albans. I might be the wrong person, might be the wrong battle, but someone looked out of a window. Yeah, someone during the Wars of the Roses. No, but it was one of the really top echelon aristocrats during the Wars of the Roses got a poleaxe in the face when he looked out of a window because he thought the enemy had all moved on, and he went, have they gone? Smack! And that was the end of him. Points for mentioning Tobias. Tobias Capwell, I presume. Smith, Ryan Smith, you're also on a roll tonight. Have I seen the 1981 film Knight Riders? Hell yes, I've seen it, and I love it. It's a great movie. Lucy's never seen that, I'm certain. So it's about a bunch of people who are on a kind of... they have a circuit of... It's a bit like they're reenactors or SCA or Renaissance Fair people, but they ride motorbikes and they joust on motorbikes. Okay, that does sound cool. And it's got Ed Harris in it and a few other fairly... You'd recognise him when you see him. He's in Westworld. He's the old guy wearing black with the... I like him. Yeah. And it's a great movie, and it's based on Arthurian legend, but told as if that story happened with a bunch of... It's like history repeating itself. That's cool. But it's a really nice movie. I like it a lot. So we should watch that movie. Yeah. It's cool. Nice. So Romain Berge says, have I seen Todd's video where he shoots a shield with longbow arrows? Hell yeah, I have. And I found it really depressing. So I enjoyed watching it. But I was like, oh, shit. The shield did really badly. And I tell you, so I've got some videos I've been planning, and Todd doing that video has affected some of what I'm planning to do with my videos, because it's changed some of my thinking. So yes, I have seen it, and it was most illuminating. Right, I'm going to have to start wrapping it up soon. Let's just see if there's any other super chats that I've missed. People are talking Ed Harris now. The one in Vienna is Ferdinand II. I'll take your word on that. I honestly can't remember. So Greg Ironside says, I really love the Avant armour found in Kelvin Grove, Glasgow. And I agree, but the thing which makes me not list that amongst the top ones is it doesn't have the right helmet with it. So everyone knows it with a barboot, with a T-shaped visor barboot, which is completely the wrong helmet for it. And the actual helmet for it is, I think, in the Royal Armouries. And it's an armet. So that type of armour, not always, but usually was equipped with an armet. The only thing I would say is the fact that it's equipped with the so-called barboot, or a type of sallet, is is something similar is shown actually in Vardy's treatise for fighting on foot. So in actual fact, someone who could afford this harness would likely have more than one helmet to go with it. So it's not completely implausible. It's just that in the case of that specific armour, we know that the helmet for it survives, but it's not partnered up with the rest of the harness, which is kind of a shame. So
there's a cool question here from the Zebra Nation, which says, which is your favourite museum for arms and armour?
So I grew up going to the Wallace Collection, and I love the Wallace Collection, but the Royal Armouries in Leeds is phenomenal.
Yeah.
And but the museum in Vienna is also absolutely phenomenal. I quite like the Stibbett collection, but there's some stuff in the Stibbett which is not really right, and it's a bit of a mess. It's not very well organised.
Do you remember that museum in Malta that had loads and loads
Yeah,
of weapons,
Malta's
but I don't
got.
remember it having armour.
Malta's got a good collection, but it's not a very big collection. Overall, I'd say the Royal Armouries in Leeds. The Gratz. I've been to the Gratz Armoury as well, which is very impressive because it's an arsenal. It's an armoury that's been together ever since the 17th century or whatever, 16th, 17th century, and that's an impressive building to go to, an impressive thing to see. But it hasn't got a great variety of stuff because it's all from quite a narrow time period. So for me, the Royal Armouries in Leeds, which of course, for those of you who don't know, is what was the Tower of London. So the White Tower, the fortress of the kings and queens of England, that was their armoury, and it's now in Leeds. A bit unfortunately for us that live in the south, but good for Leeds.
What's your favourite sword that's in a museum?
Look, these guys are asking me questions. I can't be fielding questions from over here as well. I don't know. That's too difficult. I've held two of the Emperor Maximilian II's swords in Vienna, and that was pretty cool. I've also held a couple of Tipu Sultan's swords. That was pretty cool. So for me, there are cool swords, and there are cool swords that are cool because of who owned them. And they're kind of separate things, different things. I think one of the coolest swords I've ever seen is a giant Messer in Vienna that's the size of a Zweihander. So it's like 6 foot long, but it's a Messer. It's a Messer like this big, and it's just like so cool. I would so love to wave that around and chop a melon with it.
You know what my favourite sword in a museum is?
No?
The Mary Rose sword.
Oh, okay. But that's in terrible condition, but it's very historically significant.
The coolest thing.
Yeah.
Probably this shouldn't be Lucy Chats to Matt Tower. You've got some more super chat.
Oh, I have. Have I watched any of Pursuing the Knightly Arts on YouTube? Yes, I have. It's good stuff. Yeah, I haven't. I think I've watched. I haven't watched a load, but I've watched a little bit. I actually watch quite a fair amount of YouTube. Actually,
Snake Discovery.
Lucy's addicted to Snake Discovery Channel. If you're into reptiles, then go and check out Snake Discovery Channel. And if Snake Discovery Channel see this video, give me a shout out and reciprocate with your how many million? 2 million with your 2 million subscribers. If you could give me a shout out, that would be really nice as well. PewDiePie as well. I know PewDiePie is a big follower of the channel as well. So so that's a bit sycophantic. Yeah, a Messer that makes Krieg's Messers look small. Yeah, it's huge. It's like between 5 and 6 foot long. It's Zweihander size.
That's like asking me what pet I'd
Smith Ryan Smith, still on a roll, says, which sword in my collection would you save first in a fire? That I can't answer that question. I can get quite a lot of swords into my arms like this, so. Or maybe I'd just stay in the fire with them all. I'd just go down with the sinking with the shit.
We've saved the children first.
Yeah. So Dyrus says, if when you do another movie sword fight video, can you do Steel Dawn?
Is the best.
What? Snake Discovery is the best, says Breeden.
Right?
So a Steel Dawn, funnily enough, I am aware of that there is a sword in it, but I've never watched Steel Dawn. Isn't it Patrick Swayze in that movie? Yeah, I like patch squeeze. I've just never seen that. I love the fact that I poured some port out and it's gradually going down, and yet I haven't been drinking it.
It's on film. You drinking it?
Oh, is
a
it?
considerable amount of it.
Damn it! Bloody cameras. So, Rahadium Panji Oki says, "Hey Matt, how do you prepare and design a HEMA class in Schola Gladiatore? Do you have a curriculum? How do you arrange it?" So that's actually quite a difficult question to answer. I don't have a curriculum, although I have thought about setting one out. The thing is, because Scola's grown organically over such a long period of time, we have quite a multi-layered level of instruction and advanced students in the class. So we tend to, on spec, because we never know, because we run the classes, certainly for the London class anyway, it's a bit different for Lucy's class in Surrey, but for the London class, we never know who's going to walk through the door, and you can find yourself with a room full of beginners, or you can find yourself with 30% or 50% or 80% beginners, or it'll be all old hands who've been training for ages. You never know who's going to come on a week-to-week basis, and so I can't plan classes that much. So what I usually do is I have in my head what the theme is going to be this week, but then I cater the level for who's in the room at the time. So I've always had to be, with the London class, very, very flexible. And so, yeah, I don't plan classes that much. Maybe I should drink more, but, the fact is that I never know who's going to be there. There's the core of maybe like 6 or 8 regulars, but then aside from that, I don't know who the rest of the class is going to be made up with. The exception is the so-called advanced class, which is really an intermediate class, which is we have a beginner class and then, in other words, a basics class, which more advanced people do as well. And then we have the intermediate class, which only people who've gone past the grading are able to come to. And we do set out more specifically what those intermediate classes, what the content's going to be and what we're going to cover. But sometimes we just spar. It depends how we're feeling. It depends what the mood's like. Depends who's there. That kind of stuff.
How much coronavirus has been happening?
Yeah, exactly. And we haven't done
I
haven't done anything for
the
them.
outlook of the classes.
So, aleatoriedades. Oh my god. So yes, I really tried that. Pewds follows the channel. That's cool. So I won't say PewDiePie doesn't follow this channel, but PewDiePie is aware of this channel because many moons ago, on a whim, I did a video titled "What Sword Would PewDiePie Use?" and hilariously, someone obviously showed him that video and he shared it on his Twitter. So he has seen a video by me. I'm not sure that he's seen more of that. But then hilariously, so it gets better. So I did a video on what sword would PewDiePie use, and I think I recommended that he get a saber. And then, I shit you not, about 6 months later, someone notified me, and I went and checked, and it was right. In a few of his videos, he had a saber leaning against the wall behind him. He had a Royal Naval Officer's saber. So maybe he actually took my advice and thought, yeah, I'm going to go and get a sword. I don't know. Who knows? But
people were mad about that video.
So Brutality Tops 27 says, Matt, any suggestions on putting together a solid harness? Save as much money as you can, go to a good armor maker who you're able to physically visit and get it made for you. And during that time, decide what it is you want and stick to it. Okay? So get one homogeneous harness that all fits together, that's all made in one go, by the same armourer, someone who you can visit. And remember, when you had an armour made for you, you're going to have to get alterations made and you're going to have to get things altered on it further down the line. So you want to be able to revisit that armourer, so keep a good relationship with them and pay them. And accept that armour is a work in progress. It's always a work in progress. Your body will change, whether you get more built or whether you lose weight or gain weight or whatever. And you have to be prepared for that armour to be continually worked on. Because armour, everybody I know who has armour, I don't know anybody who is 100% happy with their armour. It's always evolving and always changing. Right, I think I'm going to have to limit this to the last few questions now. There is another super chat down here. Let's see if I can find... I can never see the bottom super chat, unfortunately, so I have to scroll around till I find it. Shozbot. Where could somebody buy a non-decorative, good quality spear? I guess it depends what kind of quality you want to go for. Whether you want to go for something custom or whether...
go for a good quality one.
Well, I mean, to be honest, there are some, some of the Hanway and windlass spears are perfectly fine. What I would do is maybe go to My Armory forum and search on My Armory for spear reviews, because you'll find that quite a lot of kind of off-the-shelf spearheads are perfectly good quality for not very much money. But if you want to get something made for you, I'd recommend Tord at Thor's Forge, who made my Dane axes and my spiked battle axe as well. He makes absolutely gorgeous spearheads, and he'll make any type of spearhead to your order. So there's a good suggestion. Another person worth speaking to is Paul Binns, but Paul is always busy, and it might be more difficult. I don't know, to get on his waiting list. I don't know, but there we go. So there's some suggestions for you. I think one of the Sulovsky brothers, there are two of them that make swords. One of them makes spearheads as well, and I can't remember whether it's Damien or the other one. But anyway, there's some suggestions for you. I hope that helps. But yeah, some of the off-the-shelf spearheads are perfectly good. Just Google reviews. If you're not sure about, a windlass or Hanway or whatever manufactured one, just Google or look on My Armory or Google reviews for them and see what people say. Right. I'm just going to look for 2 more questions and then I'm going to log off. Dye the burns, says Jake Ballantyne. I think am I actually going to grow sideburns and dye them? This could be the new thing.
Well, I mean, grow them, and then if you want to dye them, you can.
Oh my god! So 667 Gullin says, now I'm wondering if you're French. Are you actually Goulin? I don't know. Anyway, it says, has anyone been to the Museum of Warfare in Paris? So the Musée de l'Armée in Paris is freaking amazing, but I've only been to it once when I was 16 years old. I really need to go back there. Yes, it's really, really worth going to the Musée de l'Armée in Paris. Really, really good. Right. Salted pork or malt beer? I feel like I've missed something that went before this. Mitchell and Webb, yes.
Oh, we love Mitchell and Webb. Your little super chat just pinged.
Another super chat came out.
For you.
Oh, so Brigadiers with the Iron Door Collective in Exeter. Hey, Exeter guys. Yeah, we know a bunch of people down there. It's good to hear from you. Ricky Marui 1 says, do I have a favourite Oakshott pattern sword? Yeah, the Type 18. 18, yes. The Type 18, not just the 18C, not just the long sword, which is what people always think of, but also just Type 18 in general. As you may notice, I've got I would call them Type 18s. Some people might debate on that one or both of them are Type 15s, but the difference between Type 15 and Type 18 is a little bit grey, hazy area. But yeah, I love Type 18s a lot. I do like other patterns as well. I like Type 19, Type 20. I like Type 14s. I like Type 10 for Viking era stuff. And I do quite like Type 17s in a bizarre way, because they're very specialised. So yeah, I like loads of them, but particularly the Type 18. Do I have a favourite shield? Well, do you know what, Scholar General? Yeah, Lucy's crazy about bucklers. I'm actually I like rotellas, and I love Indian Dals, so do you. But I'm actually getting really interested in Chinese Han Dynasty shields at the moment. They're really, really interesting.
Is that because you really like those new Chinese?
I really love the LK Chen swords that are coming through, and I'm getting more and more interested in Chinese swords and shields and everything else. Cool. So, yeah, Chinese shields I'm very interested in at the moment. I do like a Pavis. I've had the honour of handling a number of original 15th and 16th century Pavises in Germany. And Pavises are very interesting and underappreciated and understudied and misunderstood type types of shields. They're fascinating. And right.
You missed a super chat.
Yeah, I'm just trying to look for it. Oh.
No, if you go up again, that's his second pie.
Oh, right. Okay. So Mark Suarez, considering you're in lockdown, would you consider doing a Zoom panel presentation on the topic I inquired about a few weeks ago, ethical use of force?
That's a can of worms, that topic.
Yeah, it is a can of worms. And first of all, thanks for your super chat and just engaging in general with the channel. But so the problem I've got at the moment, and the main reason I haven't been doing more with the antiques business, is I just don't have time at the moment because so first we had lockdown, so we were juggling 2 kids, 1 baby and a 7-year-old between us, as well as trying to do our work. So I've had to cut down the amount of work I'm actually physically able to do. So I have less working time at the moment. And now it's summer holidays, so now my daughter went briefly back to school, and now she's at home all the time as well. So basically, I don't really have time, I'm afraid, at the moment. But I do think about various things like this, and I also think about. I know David Rawlings has been running some very successful remote HEMA classes, teaching both private lessons and I think group lessons as well on Zoom. Yeah, and other people we know in the HEMA world. And I have thought about doing this, and in the future, as I get older, it may be that I start to delegate more teaching responsibilities in my classes to some of my senior students who already do some of them anyway, and that I start to do a little bit more remotely through the wonderful new technologies that we have available to us, Zoom and such like. So who knows what will happen in the future, but hey, Max is here. Hey, Max, how's it going? Maxime Chouinard? Yeah, I do definitely need to go back to the Musée de l'Armée. I mean, 100%. I'm not quite sure how I've not managed to do it since I was 16 years old. I've literally only been there once, but yeah, absolutely, definitely want to go back there. Right. So Brigadier998 says, Matt, smooth or serrated backstrap? When? I'm XSG but had to move. Are you asking about the dating of checkering on backstraps? So basically, if you are, that they start to appear in kind of the 1830s, probably the earliest ones, but really the 1840s is when checkering starts to appear as a optional extra. And it's the 1850s when it starts to become a little bit more common, but not universal. And then, yeah, there we go. That's enough of an explanation. But there's a related essay on the Eastern Antique Arms website, if you look at the resources page. So Doc the Armoured Rhino says, have I seen the short film in production by Lindy Beige and Shadiversity? Yes, I have. It looks cool. I've watched those videos. I watched Shad's channel and I watched Lloyd's channel, as I've never hidden the fact that I've watched Lloyd for many, many years, long before I started doing YouTube videos myself. At which age? So Via Domus says, at what age would I recommend start martial arts classes? Kind of depends on the martial art. If it's something like judo, like my daughter's been doing judo for a year or 2 years, yeah, so 5.
I did karate from the age of about 8, I think.
Yeah, so as early as possible, really. With weapons, it's a little bit different, and what I always recommend to people, like I get quite a lot of emails from people who have kind of early to mid-teenage sons and daughters who want to start HEMA, and we only take 18-year-olds. We can take 16-year-olds actually with parental permission, but basically if they're younger than that, I basically say, look, do modern fencing, do Olympic modern fencing, because it's a great, if you want to do sword stuff, whether you want to do longsword, whether you want to do saber, rapier, small sword, whatever, modern fencing is a really good basis. But I would also say, if you really want to get into the medieval stuff, then if you can do some grappling, I've always said I wish that I'd done judo as a kid. If you want to do some grappling stuff, then do wrestling based martial arts from as early as possible as well. And judo's great for kids.
Judo's really, because it's been so mainstream for such a long time, they've got really good formats as far as I can
It's
see
very
for
well codified
teaching,
and
really young
and
kids
it's all
relatively safely how to do it. So.
and because it's so mainstream and regulated, it's kind of safe and it's just really really good for kids.
Our 7-year-old daughter's been doing it for about 2 years, and she loves it. So yeah.
Yep.
Oscar's asleep upstairs.
Is someone asking about Oscar?
Asking about Oscar, yeah. Cat Easton, he's Oscar Cattinson, as he is known, is asleep upstairs.
Apparently there's a museum in Liège that I need to visit. Cool. There's a nice little museum in Dijon, actually, which I've been to a number of times. Right, okay, I'm going to have to wrap it. Have I heard of the High Elves? Of course I've heard of the High Elves. I used to have a High Elf army when I used to play Warhammer Fantasy Battle. In fact, I've probably still got them in a box somewhere. No, I was mostly a Wood Elf army, but I had High Elf allies. There we go. That's the bomb drop of the evening. Yeah. Right, okay, folks. We're going to log off. Chris and the Infinite Sadness. I wish wrestling was more of a thing in the UK.
Yeah.
Lucy feels the same. She was formerly a keen wrestler. I've never been to the museum in Schleswig. No, I didn't know there was one. I don't know Schleswig at all. Right, okay, folks. Have I just checked that I've done all the super chats? I think I have.
Yeah, that was
good. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. For most of this, we've had over 300 and at one point nearly 400 viewers. So thank you so much for joining. We have been online for, oh my God, nearly 2 hours. How did that happen?
I haven't, but you did very, very good.
I was supposed to be online for an hour, but this always seems to happen. Thank you so much for joining. And we will see you again soon. I have got loads of videos edited and loaded up and ready to publish. I'm just filtering them out as they go.
Real wrestling, but WWE is still fun. Don't be mean about it.
It was catch wrestling primarily, wasn't
Indeed,
it?
Yeah.
Yes, so thank you all for joining. See you really, really soon. Have a lovely evening. Stay safe. And yeah, we'll see you soon. Thanks, folks. Bye.